Right now in Washington, the story coming from House Republican leadership is starting to fall apart. What you're about to watch isn't just another debate. It's a direct challenge to their credibility. Jim McGovern steps in and exposes a claim that simply doesn't add up, that Republicans were somehow blindsided by a Senate funding bill their own party helped pass. And here's the real issue. While leaders argue over process, real people are paying the price. From TSA agents to FEMA workers, critical services are caught in the chaos. And as McGovern puts it, this doesn't just look like incompetence, it goes beyond it.
Mr. Lauro, if we were to bring the Senate bill to the floor that is similar to your bill, do you believe that any Republicans would support the bill?
I really do. I think there would be bipartisan support because it is, and this is not self-serving. I believe it was a reasonable approach to dealing with what is a difficult problem where people had real concerns about ICE and CBP, but no one really wants to hold hostage, whether it is FEMA, Coast Guard, TSA, cybersecurity, etc. I also might add, and I'm going to quote Senator Susan Collins, who was chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee. This is her statement on the Senate vote to pass the Department of Homeland Security funding package. Passage of this package brings us closer to ending a reckless and harmful shutdown. Today's action moves us closer to ending the shutdown, which has caused chaos. It is moving, it says this is the way we need to move forward.
And is Susan Collins a Republican?
Yes.
And do you believe that she's familiar with the bill that the Senate passed last night? Or do you agree with Chairman Cole that she probably didn't read it?
No, if I know, and I think that the chairman would agree to this because all four corners have sat down numerous times, and Senator Collins, I am sure, has gone very thoroughly through what was out there.
I'll let Senator Collins speak for herself,
Okay.
but I spoke to her last night, and she was not aware of this bill. She was not talked to about
Did she issue
it.
this statement?
Well, these are her words.
Okay,
I've not made this up. This is today, 3/27/26, Washington, D.C. Senator
today.
Collins' statement on
Well,
passage of
is it-
DHA's
so
funding
this year,
package.
it's this day,
this
today?
moment.
Yeah.
Is
Wow,
today the
that's
27th?
That's an interesting observation.
Whoa.
And does anyone dispute the fact that reports say that when this vote took place on the Senate floor last night, that the Republican Senate Majority Leader, John Thune, was on the floor?
And he doesn't know anything about what's in the bill? Give me a break.
Anybody dispute that?
No.
Because,
Would the gentleman yield?
yeah, happy to yield.
Well, not just Senator Thune, but Senator Schmidt was on the floor. Senator Moreno, Republican of Ohio, was presiding in the Senate. So this fiction that somehow the Senate Republicans had no idea what they were doing. I yield back to the
No,
chair.
and that's a very good point, because you remind us that the Republicans do control the Senate, right? Because they were presiding. And I don't know whether, Speaker Johnson, has one of these devices. Like, everybody has them now. And you can communicate with one another. And the House Majority Leader, or the Republican leadership. It's hard for me to believe that the Speaker and the Senate Majority Leader don't talk, or that Republicans don't talk to their Senate counterparts. I will tell you, as a Democrat, I talk to my counterparts in the Senate all the time. I've even reached out to Senate Minority Leader Schumer on occasion. I talk to Senator Durbin. I talk to them all the time about stuff that I'm concerned about. And the notion that the Republican House leadership was just caught off guard, that they had no idea that anything was happening. I said at the beginning that I think this leadership the House leadership is incompetent, but that even goes beyond incompetence. I just can't, that defies belief. And that the White House somehow had no clue that this was going on. And again, we have reports that Trump was saying, I would sign this
Said he would sign it.
last night. Let me just...
Can I just say this one thing? I was nervous because, and this is a couple of days ago, Senator Cruz was all over this. I said, my God, Senator Cruz and I have very little in common. And we were agreeing on the same direction in which to go. And so people understood and knew what was in this bill.
Yeah. I would just close with this. You know what? We can hide behind process. We can hide behind all kinds of procedural rhetoric. And that's what ends up, that's what usually happens when my Republican friends don't want to talk about the real consequences behind what they're doing. What I care about are the people who are getting screwed, the people who are being jerked around. The TSA agents who aren't getting paid, the Coast Guard, the FEMA. I care about FEMA. I said this on the House floor. And my Republican friends say they care about FEMA, yet they said nothing when Kristi Noem wanted to zero out the agency and eliminate it. But we'll save that for more discussion later.
What Jim McGovern did in that exchange wasn't just push back on House Republican leadership. It was a methodical breakdown of a narrative that simply doesn't survive contact with reality. The core claim from Republican leadership is that they were somehow blindsided by the Senate's DHS funding bill, caught off guard by a process they had no visibility into. But McGovern doesn't attack that claim emotionally. He dismantles it step by step. Republicans control the Senate. Their own majority leader was present during the vote. Multiple Republican senators were on the floor, actively participating. Senator Susan Collins, a senior Republican and chair of Appropriations, publicly issued a statement supporting the bill, and yet House leadership expects people to believe they had no idea this was happening. McGovern exposes the contradiction by simply laying out the facts and letting the absurdity speak for itself. In a political system where coordination between House and Senate leadership is constant, where communication happens in real time, the idea that this bill moved forward without the knowledge of key Republican figures isn't just unlikely, it's almost impossible. That's why when McGovern says this goes beyond incompetence, it lands. Because incompetence suggests failure. What he's pointing to looks more like a breakdown in credibility. And the deeper implication here is even more damaging. Because if leadership truly didn't know what was happening in a Senate controlled by their own party, that signals a level of dysfunction that raises serious questions about their ability to govern. But if they did know, and are now claiming ignorance to avoid political fallout, that's a different kind of problem entirely. That's not disorganization, that's deflection. McGovern forces that dilemma into the open without needing to say it outright. He frames it in a way where there are only two options, and neither one is good. Either leadership is disconnected from its own party's actions, or it's actively misleading the public about what happened. And as the exchange unfolds, you can feel that pressure building, because no one offers a clear, credible explanation that resolves that contradiction. But what elevates this moment beyond a standard political clash is how McGovern shifts the focus away from the procedural smoke and back to the human impact. He calls out what often gets buried in these debates, the real people who are affected when government funding turns into a political standoff. TSA agents showing up to work without knowing if they'll be paid. Coast Guard members continuing operations while their financial stability is in limbo. FEMA, an agency that exists to respond to disasters, being dragged into uncertainty at the exact moment when readiness matters most. McGovern makes it clear that while politicians argue over process, it's not the people in power who absorb the consequences. It's the workers on the ground and the public relying on those services. And that reframing is critical because it strips away the abstraction and forces the conversation into something tangible and immediate. By the end of it, the takeaway isn't just that there was confusion or disagreement over a funding bill, it's that the explanation being offered doesn't hold up under scrutiny, and the consequences of that failure, whether it's incompetence or intentional misdirection, are very real. McGovern doesn't need to raise his voice or rely on theatrics to make that point. He just walks through the logic, highlights the contradictions, and brings the focus back to the people who are caught in the middle of it all. And in doing so, he turns what could have been dismissed as another routine partisan argument into something much more serious. A direct challenge to whether the people in charge actually know what they're doing, or whether they're hoping no one looks closely enough to notice that they don't.